What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to Nebraska Cornhuskers Live, episode 174. And this is the first episode since we hit 5,000 subscribers. So shout out to everybody who rocks with us here on the live. Oh, okay. I got the live once. Yeah. Do I have it up? Oh yeah, there we go. What kind of clown show am I running here? You know what I'm saying? Like, let me act like I've done this before. No, I pulled it up to tweet it out, and then I never X'd off of it. But as y'all can see here, I am joined with Wilson Dittman. Wilson, how you doing today?
Doing all right. Ready to talk some Husker football, man.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about in regards to, I mean, a little bit of everything: the stadium renovations, the recruiting, etc. So. First things first, do you want to tell everybody, if they haven't seen your stuff, where they can find you and, your latest video on Latif?
Yeah, just look up Will Snimmin Sports on YouTube and post some Nebraska football content almost every single day, trying to post maybe 4 or 5 times a week. Just posted about TJ Latif. So if you can't have, and if you want to see some more of his film, definitely click on that video after this live, of course. But yeah, again, that's where you can find me.
For sure. Good stuff over there. And what's up, Jackson? What's up, John? Appreciate the congratulations. Y'all join the Michigan show after this one. Y'all go check that out. Whether you're a Nebraska fan or not, go over there and learn about your conference foes. So Wilson, yeah, Jackson showing out, showing up, showing you some love. So let's get some Wilson some love in the chat. Drop your questions. We'll get to those in just a little bit. So first things first, man. Let's just go over the big news that I haven't touched on the live streams of this show yet, and that is the stadium renovations. So the upgraded stadium renovations, of course, originally slated for the south end zone, now moving along the east and west sidelines, and there's a lot of division on what the reasoning behind it is, or how people feel about it. Of course, the people in the South Stadium really upset because they wanted those renovations. But with your familiarity with the stadium, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, the stadium renovations a debacle. It was a debacle the first time when Alberts implemented it. Ticket prices were on the rise anyways, but his whole plan was to renovate the South Stadium, as we saw, and to get it basically down from 90,000 capacity to around 70,000. A lot of fans were not happy with that, specifically because of the fact that 90,000 were still showing up to the games for the last couple of years, the worst season in Nebraska football history. And now when we're starting to get good again, he's taking up those ticket prices, and we're not going to have as many butts in the stands. Now, again, they tried to change that with Troy Dan. That was the big talking point when he was hired by Nebraska. Is this going to get changed at all? Is it going to get moved back? Because originally under the new plan, or excuse me, the old plan, was that the whole South Stadium was going to get blown up after this season. We would not have a South Stadium for the 2025 season. Now, obviously, like we saw earlier this week, that's no longer going to be the case. But the big thing that jumped out at me is the fact that they're no longer going to be focusing on South Stadium. Now, if you go to these games, if you're a regular Memorial Stadium like I am, the South Stadium is garbage. I mean, it's completely blocked off from the rest of the stadium. If you are sitting in the north, if you're sitting in the east or the west, you cannot physically walk over to South Stadium. If you are sitting in South Stadium, you have to walk through a different entrance. The facilities are garbage. You can't get food there. The restrooms are about as bad as anywhere in the stadium, and you're all just cramped in there. So the South Stadium needs renovations more than anything else. But under the new plan, they're focusing on the east-west side of the stadium. And I was talking to Justin before we got live. The reason why they're doing this is purely because of donors. We struggled so much getting donor support for the facility project a couple years ago. They're just finally finishing that up. And we had no donor support for the South Stadium because these big donors, the guys who are millionaires, have these big companies. Why would they give money to the South Stadium where they're not sitting? So they're putting it into the East Stadium. They're putting it into the West Stadium. And this is just as controversial as, again, the old plan, because the part of the stadium that needs the renovation the most are not getting any support.
Yeah. And that is, the people in the South Stadium and alike, they have been promised this upgrade. They think they're getting this upgrade, and now they see that there's no foreseeable upgrade on the horizon. That that I don't even know if they have a timeline, because they're starting this after the 2025 season. So a couple years from even starting that, and then once they get to that, then they have to come up with a plan for the South Stadium. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, I was one of the people that didn't necessarily like the lack of the 20,000 seats, but at this point, they have to go with the donors. They're at the mercy of the donors with stuff like this, and that's the downside.
And
Is
I'm a little old school. They always talk about, making the fan experience better, but really what they're trying to do is make the donor experience better, right? At the end of the day, this is a college. This is for the students before anybody else. And a lot of times they just have the interest of what looks like the elite above everybody else. And I'm a guy who goes to almost every single home game.
Yep.
And you look at in my opinion, the rich seats, you look at the club seats in the West and East Stadium, those are the parts of the stadium that are always the thinnest on game day, right? There's basically nobody there, especially, when we get later in the season for the colder games, nobody's showing out, but there's still people showing up in the North Stadium and the South Stadium. So again, it just ticks me the wrong way. The fact they kind of had another debacle with this process. And we were talking about it as well before we got live, is that I really think a lot of this money that the donors are putting into the program, they should go to NIL, because that's what every single successful college football program is doing right now. Look at Missouri. Missouri's not historically a great program, and right now the recruiting at an elite level at the top. I believe they have a top 10 recruiting class right now. They're getting 4-star, 5-star prospects like we've never seen before, and that's all thanks to their NIL fund that's coming in from Kansas City, St. Louis. So that's what we need to do, completely revamp our NIL. I know Troy Dannon's working on that, but again, that's where all of our donor money should be going, is trying to make this program better than these stadium renovations that may or may not help us going forward.
Correct. Yeah, and that's the one thing about having to the NIL is keeping the donors happy is very important, because most of the money, I don't think they take any money from the university to pay the players or for the NIL. It's strictly donor money, and so you got to be in their good graces, and that's the unnecessary nature of the beast. And that's just, that's with any business. They're gonna do what's best in the nature of their best interest in business, and that's what this has just become. It's more and more like a business at this point, and it's just, you got to keep the right people happy.
One thing I want to touch on about Memorial Stadium before we go on to the next topic is that I saw some on Twitter that I thought was a little bit funny. There were some Husker fans basically posing the question if we're going to get a new stadium sometime in the next 20, 30 years, given the fact that we've seen so many stadium renovations over the last couple of decades. And I thought that was ludicrous. Like, no, you cannot have a new stadium other than Memorial Stadium, because in order to do that, you have to tear down Memorial Stadium, basically build up a new stadium right where it is. There's not space to build a stadium.
No.
So just want to answer that. We're not building a new stadium ever. Like, I'm 18 years old. I will never see another stadium that Nebraska ball plays in ever.
It's crazy to me, because Memorial Stadium's a mecca, right? And of course, like, it's going to come at it would come at a big cost. But to say like 20 years down the road, these stadium renovations that they're about to do are going to take, over half a decade probably to get all this figured out and sorted and be able to go renovate all the stadiums. So then they're going to turn around a little bit later and build another stadium. I don't see that either. That was in any future plans, they wouldn't spend this money on the stadium renovation. But yeah, that's a good point there. Coming back to the comments just a little bit, I'm gonna try to catch up with the comments here. Mark quit us. No, Mark I have taken over as the show host. Never mind me. I apologize. No, I'm just kidding. You're cool. You're usually on here. So Mark did not quit. You did not run him off yet. So sorry to say that. Unfortunately, in this day and age, the administrators are always looking for new revenue streams, especially in light pay for athletes on the horizon. It's all about money. Exactly. Yeah, it is what it is at this point. We can fight and battle it all day, but we kind of just got to roll with the punches. What's up, Moose? Our Michigan friend stopping in. Hey, appreciate that, John. Nebraska looked very good in the spring game. Yeah, real recognize real, right? If you know ball, you know ball. All right. Yes, Michigan Wolverines live next. John, TJ, Ferris Khan, and yeah, John's back from his vacation to Europe, so y'all go join him over there. But we'll get into a little bit of let's slide over into the collective. I know you had something to talk about with the collective that you wanted to mention specifically to 1890, and we were both talking about some of the issues that we had with it in the beginning of the show. Straight away, just the branding of it initially, and then just the, I guess, lack of a pop when it was released and sent to the public after all the work that they put into it and all we heard about it. And then of course the tone deaf beef jerky beef
Oh,
jerky
man.
game on Twitter. So yeah, what are your thoughts on the 1890 as it currently sits?
Yeah, that's another thing though, where we look back on Trev Albert's tenure, you can, make that claim that he might have dropped the ball on that collective when we were starting that off. First off, like we just said, the branding is terrible. The 1890 collective that doesn't pop, that doesn't get anybody excited. You don't want to rep that on your shirt. You don't want to rep that on your hat. The branding behind it is just about as bad as it comes. I mean, 1890. I assume that's when Nebraska football started playing. I think that's the whole, or maybe when Nebraska athletics started. I don't know if you know perhaps the meaning behind that, but the branding is awful. That's the number one thing. And the number two thing is the administration behind it is really, really not supported. Trev Alberts didn't do enough to support it. The coaches for Nebraska, you never saw them repping 1890. You never saw anybody around Lincoln repping that. Now, when Troy Dannon got here, he made that a point of emphasis to try to completely change Nebraska's NIL. He's already been astounded with just the development in Nebraska's culture, or excuse me, identity compared to Washington. I mean, Washington went to the College Football Playoff last year, and he's finding it a lot easier to position Nebraska's brand rather than Washington's. That speaks volume. So he's trying to change Nebraska's NIL, trying to make it more of a popular thing that donors really feel excited about contributing to. He wants to include everybody that you've seen that they're trying to, again, do that beef jerky thing, obviously, that puts some fans in the wrong direction because of what they did to Huskers with their beef jerky. But again, they're trying to get everybody involved. They're trying to sell merch that might have the common fan contribute to the NIL collective. So I like what Troy Dan is doing, but again, it's always one step forward, two steps back, because they're always asking the donors for these renovations, for facilities, for stadium renovations. At the end of the day, we need to put 95% of our funds into that NIL, because that's what good programs are doing. That's what Missouri's doing. That's what Alabama's doing right now. That's what Georgia is doing. Okay. Now, a lot of these programs, like I just mentioned, in the SEC, even in the Big Ten, they're not having a big stadium renovation every single year like we are.
Correct.
They're just not doing that. They're putting all their money toward five-star prospects that they desperately need on their football team. Again, Missouri's not good. When Missouri started putting NIL money in their program, they weren't making bowl games. And already look at what they're doing. They just won a New York Six Bowl against Ohio State this year, and they're on the upswing as well. So we need to put all that money in NIL. Troy Dannon understands that. He's new school. I think one of the biggest flaws about Trev was he was old school. He had that old school approach. Troy understands what needs to be done in modern day college football. He understands that the NIL collective, it wasn't doing enough to support this program. And hopefully not only do we see the program start to have more NIL funding in football, but we need to see that in volleyball. We need to see that in basketball specifically. And one thing is that we have not seen that in baseball. I read an interesting article that there was a standout pitcher, I believe from Wichita State, last offseason. He was interested in coming to Nebraska, and he basically gave Will Bolt a price tag. He said, hey, I'll come here for such and such money. Nebraska didn't have that. He ends up transferring over to TCU, and he's one of the best pitchers in the country right now. So, again, we need that money flowing, not throughout football, but throughout all the rest of the programs, because as a Nebraska fan, I want to see Nebraska football good, but I also want to see every single sport for the Huskers doing well. So, again, we need that NIL collective to get better, Justin.
And I mean, we even saw just when they had those 5-day push until signing day, and I think they set the goal at, what was it? I can't remember, 500K or something like. I was probably way less than that, but I can't remember the actual goal. But they hit it, and I mean, with 2 days, they had 5 days to people to donate, and they hit it within like the third day or something like that. Like the potential is there if they can just be a little bit. I just think attention to detail is lacking. I think they expected to just be able to launch this and fans would just throw money at it because, it's attached to the university, it's attached to NIL, but they don't understand that like a lot of people still don't know what this thing even is, and unless like you have a lot of people that aren't on social media, where they push a lot of their stuff on social media. And I think even at that concert, that Zach Bryan concert that Rule went to, he had an 1890 hat on, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And so like they're also, the coaches are even making a conscious effort to get out there and wear this stuff. Kind of like you said before, they weren't even there. Nobody was out there wearing it or even pushing this. So that's going to be huge for the future. And like you said, Dannon being very kind of new school, but I think he's a good combination of the two. Like he understands traditional college football. He understands what works in traditional college football, but he's just got that like new edge adaptability to him. And like you said, Trev was very structured in the way he operated. He was very set in his ways. Yeah. And one of the things that Matt Rule had said that he loved about Trev was ahead of the curve and things coming up, and he was prepared for certain things that weren't necessarily even in discussion, but he knew that they would be coming on the horizon just in the nature of the way these things work. And it seems like Troy Dan is very similar in that operation. He's very forward thinking, right? Even with the stuff like the stadium renovations and all that stuff, like he's not coming out and necessarily saying we've got a plan for y'all. He's still leaving it up to like we're going to figure out a plan as we go. And I think he's just willing to put his neck out there and be able to make these decisions. And that's what I respect, him coming in here and putting his neck out there, willing to make these decisions, and albeit hopefully for the betterment of the athletic department. But I do agree, like Troy, he's an excellent athletic director, and he's gonna help this collective mightily. It could have been the old school nature of Trev as the why he didn't push it. But I don't know. I don't think Trev was hesitant in NIL, but there's no way to know, especially with the way he exited. There's no way to know where his head was at with any of this.
I just go back to when they were introducing NIL, I believe 2020, summer when NIL was just first coming up. And, they'd make these top 10 lists you'd see on YouTube, on Twitter, top 10 programs that'll benefit most from NIL. Nebraska was always on those top 10 lists because, the donor money is there. We have more money flowing throughout our program than just about anybody else. But as of right now, if we're to make a top 30 list of, programs that are being benefited by NIL, do we even make that list? I don't believe we do. Troy Dan understands that. He understands how big Nebraska's potential is. I mean, he's a guy who's worked his way up through the ranks. He was at Tulane. He was at Washington. He understands that, no place that he's been is like Nebraska. Nobody has a ceiling like Nebraska, and he's going to try to hit that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And to your point, that's what also makes it hard to compete with. Like, we got a good group of guys coming in here. We're trying to compete with schools like Texas, but like Texas's resources, like top everybody in the country, like the resources that they have there. So, to be able to win those battles, it's gonna have to start happening where Nebraska climbs up in that upper echelon to be able to make sure that not only they were able to go get guys, but they're also able to keep guys. That's another thing that we need to worry about is retention and these guys not being plucked away from the university. But one of the things that I do like about Matt Rule's style is he's very much he makes it about the culture and the family and the fit. And I think that's why more people are willing to stay, and he has their best interest in heart. So hopefully that, that I think that's part of the reason why you didn't see a lot of players or coaches get plucked away in this offseason, just because like they know he has their best interest in heart. And maybe they're not going to be able to make more money now necessarily, but they have a better future ahead of them and potential for more money down the road. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I go back to when Dylan Raiola committed to Nebraska, and I'm not sure how true this is. There's a lot of rumors flying out, but his whole holdup, because he wanted to come to Nebraska around December, was how much the Huskers were actually willing to pay him at NIL, because he was getting a certain price tag at Georgia. He had a meeting with Matt Rule to discuss his payment, him and his dad. Now, again, not sure how true that is. Obviously, there's a lot of smoke around that situation to this day, but it just goes back to the fact that, Matt Rule, despite the lack of NIL funding, the lack of potential, he's still recruiting at a high level because of those connections, like you just mentioned, because of that, that ground, or excuse me, those, grassroots connections, not only with those kids, but with those parents, with those high school coaches. That's really where Matt Rule flourishes. You've already seen that for Nebraska, and we're trying to land, top 15 class, something we haven't done in a very long time.
Speaking of relationship with parents, let's transition over to Dawson Merritt, right? I don't know if you saw last night, I had retweeted it. Dawson Merritt's dad and a few people reposted it today, going on to the old Cam Taylor-Britt from the spring game where he was like, I guess it's time, my turn to recruit or something like that. And he was asking Matt Rule, he said, hey, can you give Coach Rule my number or something like that? I need to ask him something. Okay, so we are in a competition directly with Alabama there, right? And so first off, it's one of those things like, okay, we're in a competition with Alabama. That's a good thing, But, do you think because we do have a good shot at getting him, of course. I'm not sure where I would put are positioning right now just until he visits Alabama. But his dad tweeting that. I mean, do you take anything away from that? I just want to get your take first. Do you take anything away from that or do you read into that a little bit as Nebraska might have a potential leg up?
Oh, absolutely. And, he's been on campus multiple times. Obviously, he was on campus recently, but him and his dad, his mom have been on campus, and his dad's tweeted out stuff before about how much he loves Lincoln, how much he loves the campus. I know Doss was really impressed.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Yeah, his parents love Lincoln. Again, we're not sure about why he wants to contact Matt Rule. I'm sure there's some speculative speculation about that on Twitter right now. But the number two thing that I love to see from Dawson Merritt is just the fan support. He tweeted something out the other day. I'm sure you saw it, where it was basically Husker fans show some support, and then he said Alabama fans show some support. Nebraska's tweet had about 2,000, 3,000 likes. The Bama one had about 200. Right. So again, it's just that fan support that these guys really gravitate towards. And we see this all the time when guys visit Nebraska and guys were here for the spring game. They said, everybody knew who I was. There was a guy I talked about in my recent video, Antonio Branch. And somebody came up to Antonio Branch, who was a 4-star DB out of Miami, and they knew exactly who he was. They knew his story. They knew that he played varsity high school football in his 8th grade season. They knew all these small details. That just blew him away. That's that fan support by Nebraska. And I think not only does Dawson gravitate toward that, but his dad does. And I think that's going to be big for him. And again, a guy that's really close to his family like Dawson is, he's really going to benefit from going to a program that's really close to home. Again, he's a Kansas kid. That's a lot closer to Nebraska than it is to Alabama. So it's going to be a lot easier for his mom and dad to come up for every single game rather than, traveling over to Tuscaloosa almost every single weekend. So again, that's something that Matt Rule, I know, is trying to recruit towards. They're trying to have those close ties with his family. And I really think that Nebraska has a great shot, around a 40-50% chance. But again, there's a lot of time between now and when he commits. Obviously, has a lot more visits to go on this summer. And really, in modern day college football, as we both talked about, it's not over until you sign.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of people's hesitation. Like, when people sign, like TJ Lateef, people are talking about that. But when it comes to Dawson Merritt, I think you're right on, you hit it right on the head. Because, we saw the picture with his mom, back when they visited campus, and his dad is very vocal about, his son. And you can tell that his parents are heavily involved in his recruitment. And typically, you got guys like Cortez Mills, when Cortez Mills came out for the spring game, talking about how he felt like his family was on the visit, and that's another thing that I think helps these people, these kids that they bring in, these families. I think that's another thing that helps Nebraska with that retention and stuff like that is that they do have a family atmosphere, but not only that, they care about the family, they care about the player. And so I think with the way Dawson's dad is, the way he comes across is he just really wants his son in the best situation for him as a young man, and Matt Rule has a very, very good reputation in terms of that. And, and it's one of those things like DeBoer, younger coach. But Matt Rule, like, they know the relationships that he's built and stuff like that. And when he speaks, when he talks, he knows what he's talking about, and the way he commands a room and the way he's able to talk and present things, like, I would imagine that does have an influence on recruits and their family and stuff like that, just because he's a great talker. But I'd say probably I would put Nebraska in the 40% camp with this, only because, like, it's just like you said, so up in the air. Decisions could change, minds could change, but he could also cancel that visit. You never know what conversations are going on in the back burner, if this is something that they may be reaching out to in regards to some kind of, maybe Alabama's throwing him something here and he needs to reach out and say, can you match this here? So it really votes to the fact that Nebraska has a really good shot at him. And before, it felt like people were like, oh, okay, we're competing with Alabama. Now it's like people are like, okay, we have a legitimate shot at beating Alabama for this, for this guy.
Yeah, no, we've just seen so many examples of Matt Rule building connections with parents. I mean, Vincent Shavers, his dad, another guy is very vocal on Twitter. I remember right before Vincent Shavers committed, his dad basically broke the news early because he loved Matt Rule. He was super excited. I remember another Florida kid, plays linebacker, Willis. I'm going to butcher his last name, McGahee.
McGahee.
Feel free to correct me. It's not McGahee. It's something else. Anyways, but his dad, obviously legendary Miami running back, went over to the NFL. And the reason he went to Nebraska is because his dad basically convinced him that Matt Rule was the reason he's going to get to the NFL, that Matt Rule is one of the better developing head coaches in all of college football. So again, it's just those parents that that really get involved as well and really make those decisions along with their kids. And Matt Rule understands that. He loves building those connections with young men, but those parents, that family members, those high school coaches, again, I've talked about that extensively. Matt Rule is all about building relationship with high school coaches.
Yep.
And real quick, we'll go on a tangent about David Sanders. David Sanders, number one player in all of the class of 2025.
Yeah, let's move over.
Out of North Carolina. Matt Rule coached in North Carolina when he was with the Panthers. I mean, that's not a coincidence. He builds those connections all over the state. Obviously, he has connections within that high school, one of the better high schools in all of America when it comes to producing D1 talent. And he got him to visit. So it's all about Matt Rule building connections. Again, all these grassroots methods. A lot of these new school coaches, they try to blow it off. We've saw guys like Lovie Smith with Illinois blow that off. Deion Sanders right now with Colorado, he's blowing that off. But that doesn't succeed. Matt Rule understands that a lot of times you have to be old school. It's all about new school. What can you do efficiently? But at the end of the day, being old school, taking those visits, learning about a family, learning about a head coach for a high school program is going to give you the best shot to land a 4-star, 5-star talent.
Yeah, it's because, I mean, in one breath, like, that these kids talk about all the time when a whole staff comes to visit them, just how much that means to them, And so when you have Matt Rule or staff coming out to do these visits and doing them regularly and not just going, seeing them one time and then coming back and then trying to recruit them, they're trying to get out there as much as they can to not only guys that they're recruiting, guys that have already committed. And, all of this is what Matt Rule has always done. And kind of like you said with the old school, and this is another mending of the old school with the new school. People were wondering, like, Matt Rule's the traditional recruit these guys based on raw talent and develop them, right? Because he says athleticism has a ceiling or a skill. Athleticism has a ceiling, skill doesn't, right? You can always develop your skill set, okay? And so when he's, with the way in the style in which he recruits, he knows the foundation of teams is still through recruiting. You look at teams like Ohio State, Ohio State still develops and puts the most 3-stars into the league. They're one of those teams that, like, they don't just have 5 stars. Now they're locked and loaded with 5 stars, but they have developed guys that aren't. And not only that, they land 4 and 5-star guys and they develop them, So to be able to in this modern world to go out and just grab somebody out of the portal, that's one thing. But for high school recruiting, you need that foundation, right? You're built on. You talk about Kansas, and I've talked about this many times before, the 500-mile recruiting radius, right? Those are the players that statistically are most likely to stay, because stuff comes up with family, and you see players have to leave, and transfer, or it just makes it so much easier in all that regard. The family-oriented people, they're able to come see their games and stuff like that. And so just the way that he's kind of crossed over and still kept his style and stayed true to what he does, that's what I think a lot of people buy into with Matt Rule, is that no matter what, he sticks to his guns and what he knows works. And even when everybody else is going left, he's still going right, but he's drifting left a little bit. And I think that's why Nebraska's gaining momentum in a lot of these, these other places too, is just these players that see that commitment there in recruiting. And you got schools like Ohio State and Texas still at the top. They're still recruiting. They're still out there recruiting for a reason. Ohio State could probably go grab anybody from the portal with the money they're throwing around. You know what I'm saying? So it's just one of those things where it's like, this foundation finally feels good, and having a coach that's able to bring guys in and keep guys in a world where the first sign of any, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Any sign of doubt in these kids, they're gone, right? And in the modern world, being able to retain people, that is recruiting in and of itself, and the effort that goes into that and the effort he puts into it. I mean, this staff looks exhausted half the time from all the recruiting, and Matt Rule talks about how exhausted he is all the time. But that's a good transition over into the 2025 recruiting. You've looked into David Sanders and a few of these guys that were, prospects that we're looking at and very high on the board. So, who are some of the guys that you really like that stand out to you based on their film?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you got to start off with Michael Terry. I know I've talked about him a lot,
Mhm.
but he is number one on Nebraska's board right now. He's the best wide receiver we're going after. And really, when you tweeted this out the other day, it's us in Texas. He is going to have an official visit to the Longhorns in a couple weeks. And right now, I like our odds. I think we're sitting about 30% chance. I mean, you'll take that with a 5-star prospect, but
Yeah.
and Michael Terry's a stud. I did a film review on him, just a complete utility knife. I mean, it feels like we're beating a dead horse when we're talking about him so much, but he's that good of a prospect because people need to take him seriously. And Nebraska's odds there. Another guy that I've talked about before, Jamarion Parker. It looks like he's going to commit very, very soon. Nebraska's the heavy favorite, obviously. 4-star running back prospect, former Arkansas commit. As of right now, looking at where he's visiting, he's going to come to Nebraska June 21st. And according to 24/7, I'll have to check on 3. He's not lining up any other visits. It looks like it's all just a matter of time before Jamarion Parker signs that dotted line. And just a couple other guys that I have my eyes on. Of course, you have Corey Sims out of Missouri right now. The Missouri's going hard on him. Another 6'4" wide receiver, 4-star prospect, guy who's been repping Nebraska a lot on social media, but Nebraska really trying to land him. So there's a lot of 4-star guys that we're going to have to really keep our eyes on. We have some good visitors lined up. I guess one more I'll mention. Let's take it to in-state linebacker Christian Jones. That's going to be a fight, man. He's going to go on a couple recruiting visits all over the country this summer. He's going to a couple camps, I believe a 5-star camp that he announced the other day. Again, this is a really, really good prospect for Nebraska, really raw prospect. I've seen him a lot in person, and he's heavily scrutinized. A lot of people think that, he might not be as good as what the recruiting rankings indicate. He's just super raw. And we see this all the time from really talented prospects where they're super athletically gifted. It just might not show up on the field just yet, but the stats look really good. Yeah, he's not great in the passing game as a linebacker. You'd ideally like to have him at middle linebacker, but yeah, I mean, that ceiling is super high, and there's a reason why he's almost a 5-star prospect, and everybody in the country wants him. So Christian Jones is a player who I really have my eyes on this summer. I think a lot of Nebraska fans just casually think he'll become a Cornhusker because Matt Rule's trying to lock down the state, and I get that. But again, he's very interested in some other programs, Notre Dame, Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's the favorite. Florida's in the mix there. He loved his visit. So definitely watch out for Christian Jones, but just a guy that really, I don't think Nebraska right now has a good shot at landing. I'd probably put it about 15%. And that was always the deal with Christian Jones, even when he was a freshman prospect out of Burke High School, was that I know people thought that he wasn't going to go to Nebraska because Nebraska didn't win. And that was number one for him. Again, I know you're not in Nebraska, and so I don't know how much you follow Nebraska high school football, but he was originally at Omaha Burke. And Omaha Burke used to be very good. Now they're very terrible. He likes to win. So he transferred over to Omaha West Side. Now he's winning a state title almost every single year. So it's all about winning for him. And if you can't guarantee that, if you're Matt Rule, he doesn't want to come here. So Christian Jones, a super talented prospect, and he's so important to land if you're trying to lock down the state.
Yeah. It's funny. So I actually, because most of my family still lives there. So my cousin, his name's actually Creighton, but he goes to UNL. But he played high school ball out there, so he kept me updated on the high school ball and the players out there. And then every time I was out there, I go check out a game of theirs. So not as up on it as you. I'm not able to watch it live, so I'm at the mercy of the film. Christian Jones is a great player, but like you said, it's tough because there's been a lot of these guys in Nebraska where Nebraska has the inside shot at a lot of these guys, but some of these guys that are more talent rich that these bigger schools are coming after, it's still going to be tough to keep them here because again, you got to compete with NIL at the end of the day as well. And so you said it best, their priorities matter. And if the 500, if being close to home doesn't matter to him, then that's not going to be a good enough pool. And so those are the things you got to worry about is not everybody just necessarily wants to be close to home. Some players want to get as far away from, almost.
I think it's just a testament to also, Scott Frost, the way he burnt so many bridges in Nebraska, specifically Omaha, with those high school coaches. Paul Lamongi is the head coach at Westside High School right now. He used to be at Omaha Burke. That's another reason why Christian Jones transferred. But he had a prospect who was a 4-star linebacker a couple years ago by the name of Devon Jackson. And he basically, the whole coaching staff at Burke, now Westside, told him, don't go to Nebraska. You're not going to win football games. Scott Frost is not a good head coach. He does not have your best interest at heart.
Yep.
And he ended up committing to Oregon. We saw another 4-star prospect, Deshaun Woods, did not commit to Nebraska. Another 4-star prospect, Caden Helms, did not commit to Nebraska, went over to Oklahoma. So Scott Frost, he was terrible at recruiting in-state, specifically Omaha. A lot of people, I understand that we need to lock down Lincoln. We need to lock down the western cities in Nebraska, but Omaha is king. That's where the best talent comes from. That's where the 4-star prospects come from. You've got to land down the metro area, and Scott Frost couldn't do that. And Matt Rule's still struggling with it. Obviously, he did a really good job in the class of 2024, landed 3 Bellevue West guys. But again, he's still working on that. And you can see that because of the fact that we haven't landed Christian Jones yet. We haven't even landed Chase Lofton, who's the second best player in Nebraska.
Yep. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I'd actually broken down the numbers. And I believe, if I remember correctly, in 5 cycles, Scott Frost had 10 players from the state of Nebraska. In 5 complete cycles, Matt Rule's already had 10 currently. And then also broke down the percentages that they had of, the period of time where Nebraska was winning. And it was 33, plus % of the team was from in-state. That went down to, I believe, 7% or 17%. Can't quite remember off the top of my head under Frost. And it's back up to 32% under Rules so far in terms of just the class percentage. So it's one of those things that he's really trying to put an investment back into recruiting the area heavy, because when Nebraska was winning, that's where, a lot of the players were from. And now Nebraska had strength and conditioning that was next level back then. But still, you have great tight ends in this area, great linemen in this area, and the talent's going to continue to develop. Like you said, Omaha's a very talent-rich place, and it's going to continue to develop. The talent's going to continue to get better. It's just like Arizona. Like Arizona high school football is getting better. Ty Robinson came from the state of Arizona. So a lot of good players to be had, but as the talent gets better, the competition gets steeper in terms of keeping those players in state. But I think Matt Rule's got a good plan in place in terms of that. Couple of the, I did a film review on let's talk about the line real quick. I did a film review on oh my gosh, why do I always draw a blank?
Bixby.
Yeah,
blanket. Broderick Scholl.
Golly. And then did you break down David Sanders?
I didn't do a film reaction about him. I just did a video.
Okay. What is your overall take on David Sanders? I know a lot of fans are excited about him just because the line is such a crucial part of this team and such a controversial part of Nebraska football the last few years, because it's the hardest position group to build. And a lot of teams in college football don't have good lines. And so it's one of those things it's a slow build, but the positive signs are there. So what is your take on the couple of linemen, Broderick Scholl and the tackles specifically?
Yeah, starting off with David Sanders. Again, the big question around him whenever, I break down a recruiting video is, will he commit? Will he end up being a Cornhusker? And, a lot of times I want to hamper the expectations. I mean, he's the number 1 prospect in America. It's a big deal he even came on campus. That means that Matt Rule's doing a great job in the recruiting aspect of getting these 4-star, 5-star players even interested in Nebraska. They wouldn't consider Nebraska 4 or 5 years ago. Now, do I believe that Nebraska will land David Sanders? No, I do not, right? Nebraska didn't land or was not in his top 6. Obviously, a lot can change, so I'm not really holding that against him. But again, he looks like a guy that wants to stay in the region. He's very interested in Clemson, very interested in South Carolina. I know the Gamecocks have about $2-3 million they're willing to spend on him because, of their NIL fund, and they want to keep him around the region as well. So I don't believe that Nebraska has a great shot at landing him. I'm not really focused on that. I'm focused on the fact that we even got this guy on campus, that we have those connections in North Carolina to bring him on. He enjoyed his visit. They did the whole thing where he brings the entire family. They do, I think they cook a meal together. The recruits love that. Caleb Benning was also on campus and with his dad, with his mom, and basically talked to him the entire time. So he had a great visit, and that's going to mean great things in the future. But no, I don't think we'll land David Sanders. That's not really a hot take. It'd be a very, very big uphill battle to try to get his talents. But Nebraska does have a shot if they try to, rally together some money. Again, you're going to need a fork over about 7 figures. That's the price tag for a number 1 prospect. That's borderline at minimum what you need, about 7 figures, around $1-2 million. I know a lot of fans are like, that's unbelievable. You should see what 5-star quarterbacks are getting. There's a big storyline with Jaden Rashada who was a 5-star prospect quarterback last year, and he was promised like $12 million from the University of Florida.
That's
right.
crazy.
So it's not even a lot that we're trying to give him $2 million. And I'm not sure if we are or not, but that's what needs to be done if you want to get his talents. And I see this all the time. 5-star prospects, they want to play with other 5-star prospects.
Yep.
Not only do they want to play with 5-star prospects, they want to play with 5-star quarterbacks.
Yep.
So if Dylan Raiola continues to build that connection with them, we do have a shot. I just don't like our odds. But going on to the guy that I do like our odds with, it's Broderick Shaw out of Bixby. Bixby, one of the best high school programs in all of America. Nebraska has tried to recruit a bunch of guys from that high school over the last couple of years. And Broderick Shaw loved his visit. They did the thing where they make an individual video for the recruit that he can post on social media. He said that he was just astounded with Matt Rule building those connections with him. And from what it sounds like, it's down to a 2-horse race, us and Auburn for Broderick Shaw. I like our odds.
Yeah.
He's still yet to visit Auburn, but that would be a huge addition. And just a really athletic guy, has a lot of good weight on him. Utility knife when it comes to plays a bunch of different sports. I remember I commented on your video about him. My favorite bit about Broderick Shaw is that he's in the choir.
Yeah, that's
show choir. He's just committed to a bunch of different things, and so it's something that Matt Rule loves. Okay, cool. You're really good at football, but can you do other things? Can you play basketball? Can you commit to being a good student? Can you commit to being a part of the choir, be a part of clubs around your school?
Dedication,
that's an indictment on your character. That's an indictment on your commitment, and that's something I love about Broderick Shaw. And I like our odds. I think it's going to be a 2-horse race, and I think when he goes over to Auburn, he understands that they're not doing it at the same level Nebraska is. I'm going to go to a program that I feel valued in, and that I know I can develop as a ball player.
Yeah, and to your point, Fongwei talking about the O-line here, Rockstar QB can only take you so far. But I do, the line is getting better, and that's the thing. Like, I don't think we can be too upset about where the line stands because, listen, offensive lines, and I've talked about this before, are the hardest thing to build in terms of because an offensive line has to work as a cohesive unit. It's the same reason why Colorado won't be successful going out and trying to patchwork a line in the portal, because more than any position, even quarterback, in my opinion, offensive line is the hardest thing to come in and be successful at immediately. I looked at the numbers from the 2020, 2021, 2022 class for those top 50 linemen, and I'm telling you 95% of them redshirt, and very few of them play meaningful snaps. And so it's one of those things where those guys typically have to come in, they have to add muscle, but they have to learn, the schemes, the blocking schemes, but also develop their skill set. A lot of these linemen are very raw, and there are certain attributes that they want them to have coming in to at least have minimal attributes in terms of that they can build off of. But if they got those things, then it's a great situation. And Roger Shaw, starting with David Sanders, but I'm right there with you. It's one of those things that we're getting these guys to campus, and that alone should be something that fans are happy about, because there was a point where we were not getting 5 stars to even look our direction, and under Scott Frost, they really weren't. Like, we didn't even feel like we had an outside shot at a lot of 5 stars. Let's be honest, even during Dylan Raiola's recruitment, I never felt confident about that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Same here.
And so it's nice to be able to have that presentation and be able to work those guys on the campus and them to come out and say they had a successful visit. And it's another thing too, because these guys have limited time, so these visits aren't just wasted. They're coming with intention. TJ Lateef, we weren't even in his top 7, and eventually he ultimately committed. So we'll see what happens with that. But Broderick Shaw, excellent tackle. He's going to be great for a kind of zone blocking scheme. Very long in the arms. Just he moves very well for his size. Good base, good leverage, good footwork. He's just got a lot of things that you like in a lineman. If you don't have a good base, if you don't have good footwork, if you don't have a good stance, those are the typical things that you want a lineman to have, and to be able to identify blocks and plays quickly. When he's pulling, he doesn't get himself too far in the backfield. He identifies the block and he sets the block. And even when there was one play that I liked on his film where he was looking for a guy to block, did a full rotation, kind of got tripped into, did a full rotation and fell right onto his block. Just did a full 360, locked right onto his block and made the block. It's little plays like that show you the instincts and the football IQ of these guys. And while there is room for development, again, that's what you want. If you get some solid 4-star guys in here and you can develop them, you're going to have a very, very good line without even having to touch the portal, and then you add guys like Micah Mazuka to a line that's improving. But go ahead.
Oh, no, good. Just finish what you're saying.
No, that was it. Just basically
Uh,
like with Nebraska's line now, like we go out and get
yeah.
Michael Mazuka. We don't go out and get 5 linemen to bring in to come start, you know?
And again, you made a good point going back to David Sanders, the fact that we weren't on his top 6. And this is something I've talked about before is the fact that schools don't respect, these top schools when you say on Twitter, oh, I've narrowed it down to top 4 or top 6, specifically this early in the recruiting process. They're still going to contact you. They're still going to go after you. So I think a lot of times people put too much stock into, oh, we made this player's top 5. Oh, we didn't make this player's top 5.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter because Nebraska is still contacting them. They're still trying to land their talents because in recruiting, everything changes. It changes every single day. People will sit here and they'll say, oh, Nebraska has a crystal ball for this prospect. Yeah, but that crystal ball was in there 4 months ago. Everything has changed since then. That really holds no value. So all those top schools, and a lot of people like to put smoke into that, but just because David Sanders didn't put Nebraska in there doesn't mean he's not interested, as we just said. So I think a lot of times, we saw that with TJ Lateef. Nebraska wasn't in those top 7 schools. Nebraska hadn't even offered him. They offered him a couple days later, and boom, he's committed within 3 months. So just want to say that a little bit because I think that just that top 6 schools or top 5 schools, people overrate that. They get too excited about that. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. We see it all the time, especially with the way college recruiting is working nowadays.
Yeah, and that I was trail off to that last point. Nowadays in the NIL world, you don't know half the time if they're just doing this for engagement. If they put Nebraska and Colorado in their top 10 schools, you know what I'm saying? Like they know they're going to get engagements. They know they're going to get people to come after their posts. They know they're going to get followers. So that's another thing that we got to take into account is in the new modern age of the way the recruiting works nowadays is they're looking out for their best interests, and that's why like I'm weary of little stuff like, when Dawson Merritt, for instance, like is like, all right, Alabama fans, show love, Nebraska fans show love just a little bit. Cause I'm just like, should I, or is this like an engagement type of deal? Because a lot of recruits that have not committed, I would say most do stuff like that,
Oh, completely.
Yeah. Stuff like that for us.
Yeah, on Twitter, that they always do that. They'll post, "Oh, where you at? Where you at, Nebraska fans? Where you at, Michigan State fans?" It's all about that engagement, all about those clicks. A lot of those 5-star recruits, all those 4-star recruits, they are about that. They are about getting engagement, trying to rally fans around them, even though they have no interest in actually committing. I remember there was a prospect. It was a long time ago at this point, 3-4 years ago. Terrence Lewis was his name. He was a 5-star linebacker. And he basically on Twitter kept hyping up Nebraska fans. Everybody thought we had a shot at him. We had no shot at him. He ended up, committing somewhere, decommitted, committed elsewhere. Long story short, he's not playing college football anymore because he broke the law. Don't want to get into that. But at the end of the day, we've seen a lot of 4-star, 5-star prospects, try to engage farm Nebraska fans because they understand that, if they post about the Huskers, you're going to get 1,000 likes. Yeah. So it is absolutely good to be wary about that. A lot of times that's what they're doing. But a guy like Dawson Merritt, I specifically think actions speak louder than words. And he is interested in Nebraska. And he has been on the campus for Nebraska multiple times. And a lot of times, if you've done that, I do believe you're actually interested. So, I'll give you a like or I'll give you a retweet because of it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about it is like, that's the only reason like I would bring up like a Dawson Merritt on this, because I know like he's bought in, he's made it known that like he wants, Nebraska is very, very high on his list. Nebraska is very high on his family's list. Like you said, they spoke about how much they love Nebraska. They love, everything that's going on here. So yeah, when it's somebody like that, it's probably, and especially like the confirmation yesterday with his dad saying, hey, reach out. It's one of those things that like that gives you a good indication of where they're at. So with guys like Dawson, but like you said, we've been burned in the past with those guys like Nebraska fans show love and all this other stuff. And I would say more often than not, those guys are just kind of getting engagements and things like that. So I'm gonna try to go through some of the comments here. Missed some of them. Let's see. So I'm still cautiously optimistic. Okay, I want to think it's equal between Omaha, the rest of the state, a lot of players from the rest of Nebraska. Modern day college football sucks. I love the idea of NIL, but it's gotten out of hand. No true loyalty anymore. That's another thing too. It's going to eventually. They're going to make more than NFL players here in a little bit if they don't implement some changes. So I'm pretty sure this will get reeled in at some point. It's with the joint committees that they got in the Big Ten and the SEC and going after the NCAA, like there's going to be a lot of conversation about how to resolve this because the numbers even over the last couple of years, just think about how much the numbers of what they're paying these kids has grown. And that's only going to get more and more because it's almost like some of these schools have unlimited resources. And then at that point, it's like keeping up with the Joneses, and everybody's just going to pay more and more money. And it's just going to be a bidding war until they figure that out. But yeah, there's so much to get sorted out legally, and there's so much to get sorted out in terms of how you can do this without taking too much away from the player, again, for their name, image, and likeness. But there's got to be some kind of, this is going to turn into an NFL salary cap type of thing at some point, and it has to. Otherwise, we're going to get run off of college football completely. But I don't know your thoughts on that. Bring on the 5 stars. There are lawsuits ever. Yeah, exactly. Well, you still got Florida State. Florida State was beefing with the ACC. They had a whole lawsuit. Well, they still got a whole lawsuit going on there, and it was the ACC was trying to get it battled in Carolina because that's where ACC headquarters is. But then Florida State wanted it in Florida, and dude, it's crazy. You got teams going after conferences. I think we're seeing.
You might be even referring to the NIL lawsuits again, like I mentioned before, the Jaden Rashada whole deal that we saw today. That he's basically suing the University of Florida because he thought he was owed, a certain amount of money that he was never paid. And we've seen that a couple storylines throughout the last couple of months that these quarterbacks or these prospects, they sign these deals and the universities end up not paying them. So I think that's what maybe he's referring to there. But yeah, the NIL, like you were talking about, there's no regulation. We've really seen no regulation in the first 4 years of it. Everybody was sitting there in year 1 and it was already off the charts, and we were sitting there, okay, we're going to get regulation soon. If anything, we've seen less regulation on NIL. It's not good for the sports, not good for a lot of these high school kids' minds, their egos, because they're all focused on the money rather than actually being a good student athlete and going to the NFL. Because really, it's nice to get that check for how much you're getting, $500,000, $1 million, but you want sustainable wealth, generational wealth. You want to get to the NFL. That should be number one on everybody's priority list.
Correct. And the Florida State lawsuit with the ACC was about, there was a whole bunch of money, TV rights, grants, and stuff involved in that. So there's lawsuits on every level in terms of players to NIL, teams to conferences about the business side of it and the money side of it. And it's a matter of how are they going to get all this sorted out when they're already fighting, everybody's fighting each other in court as it is. It's going to be a long, long process before they sift through this and kind of it's going to be, I think, on the universities to kind of draw a line somewhere at this point for right now. But I think we're already seeing guys that can't afford to leave college. Yeah. We pay for the NBC app. Do we get all the games on NBC? We got CBS games also. I think there was this one post the other day for the NFL, a la carte. It's going to be $600 something for all the streaming services.
I saw they're putting the Christmas games on Netflix now. That's terrible. There's no way. There's no way they're really, benefiting from that as awful. That's just awful for the common fan.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this one right here, it's going to kill college football. I don't think so. The part of it is I love college football. I will always love college football, even though it's not the traditional college football we know and love. Change happens. We just got to adapt to it. It's. I think the biggest thing for me that's hurting the brand, the college football more than anything, is all the commercials. That to me is during the game and shortening the games and stuff like that. I prefer the longer games. I prefer there are more plays to be played on the field, and to me that is, it's another money thing, but first and foremost, the NIL, that's ruining the actual game and watchers' experience, even at the stadium, because they got to pause for all those breaks and stuff.
Yeah, I remember last year it was the first year they basically sped up the game. They don't stop the clock after a first down. There were just so many timeout breaks, TV breaks, and even at the stadium, you're just sitting there and basically waiting for the game to get back on because there's another TV break. And I remember again this offseason they have a 2-minute warning now. It's all about how can we fit in more commercial breaks. And one thing that I think, and this is a hot take, I've definitely caught flack for this before from my subscribers, is that I don't like the way they're going when it comes to the college football playoff. I think expanding that, it's a whole loophole we could talk about, but I love the tradition of college football. I love the Rose Bowl. Yep. I love New York Six Bowls, and I understand that bowl games are already dead. They've been dead for a decade. They've been dead for a very long time. And perhaps this is the best thing you could do right now to bring a little bit of a sense of tradition back and try to, get the players to, get more energized about the postseason. Sure. But it's all, to me, the tradition's already been dead. College football is already, is already changed enough. I don't know why people are overacting about it dying now. If you're a big fan of tradition's been gone for a long time, and you're still watching college football every single Saturday. So again, that's like you just said, Justin, change happens, and we're going to adapt as a sport, and college football is king.
Yeah. And Isaac, I'm fine with the changes where they're going to try to fix it too late. Yeah. That's the thing. But the one part about it is, at the end of the day, the middle ground will be found. How much it crumbles before we get there, we don't know. But college football, as we know and love it, is still here. It's still the University of Nebraska, and we're going to follow along. But I'm actually happy the players are getting paid. I just don't like the way it's gone down. But they've always deserved to get paid. Long way here. Just give every kid a pool cue and a Corvette, and let's go. That's what I'm talking about. That's the spirit right there. What do you think they're going to do to fix all the guys opting out of postseason play? I don't think you can fix that. You can't make them play.
And like I just said, what they're trying to do is that was the whole reason they extended the playoff, was now nobody's going to opt out if you're in the playoff because there's a national title on the line. So you're basically trying to patch a hole that you created, and you're probably going to create a bunch of more issues through this new playoff. But at least you're fixing one thing. So I can guarantee you those 12 teams that make the playoff, they're not going to see anybody opt out. But you're probably going to see a lot more opt-outs from the teams that didn't make it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but at least we get some more quality football in the postseason if you're into that.
I think the only way that they could that this could be fixed is on an individual basis. And if you're like, you write in a bonus, like if we start doing contracts, because they don't do contracts right now, and they start doing contracts that maybe you get a bonus if you play in the bowl game. If Nebraska makes a bowl game, you play in the bowl game, you get a bonus. Who knows? But they can't really force them to play because they're looking out for their future. They don't want to get hurt before the NFL, things of that nature. I'm not a fan of it. Of course, I like the bowl games. I like the extra game at least, but it's tough.
I don't understand, because really the bowl game should be the highlight of the season for a lot of these teams that win 8-9 games. That should be the highlight of your season, to win a bowl game. But a lot of these prospects are looking out for number one. I get it, right? They're trying to save themselves for the NFL, but that same NFL prospect was playing against an FCS team early in the season. That same NFL prospect was playing against, a 3-4 win Power 5 team that they were going to win no matter what. So it doesn't really, if you're opting out of these bowl games, why don't you opt out of those games? And I'm not saying they should, and that's been, talked about in the past a lot, but it's just a big issue there.
Yep. We'll get a couple more questions before we get rolling. Isaac, maybe there should be a game minimum to earn your NIL. Yeah. But right now, the way it works is there's no contract. So right now it's just promises made, handshake deals. But when they get contracts rolling in there eventually, then they'll probably be writing clauses. It'll turn into just the NFL contracts at that point. What kind of adjustments do you think the new conference teams will have to make to the Big Ten style of play? When it comes to that, my personal take on it is we saw Pac-12 versus Big Ten last year in the national championship game. The Pac-12 teams are going to have to adjust more than the Big Ten teams, of course, because they got to get bigger in the trenches. And the way there's speed, people act like there's only speed in the Pac-12. There's speed in the Big Ten. Ohio State has athletes. Michigan has athletes. Like, those teams are fast, but they're also big and strong, so they can beat you at multiple places. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I was really looking forward to see Chip Kelly as the head coach of UCLA in the Big Ten. Obviously, now he's over at Ohio State as their offensive coordinator. I think his offense would have fit perfectly in the Big Ten. They had a power running attack. I don't know if you remember their team. I believe 2 years ago they had Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They had Zach Charbonnet. They had a great offense. That would have flourished in the Big Ten. But yeah, they definitely need to adapt to that power running attack. That's something that Nebraska has found out when they got to the Big Ten. I know Maryland Rutgers found out nobody runs the football down your throat more than the Big Ten. That's what you need to do to succeed.
Yep.
It's all about those small things, especially when you play teams like Iowa, Wisconsin. They might not be the most talented teams in the world, but they're going to force you to make mistakes. They're going to take advantage every single time. They're just going to wait until you make a mistake, third, fourth quarter, and pounce. So a lot of times, again, those programs, they're very well recruited. Again, there's a lot of 4-star, 5-star talents at all 4 of those schools. but it's going to be about making those small mistakes and how to limit those against some of these top tier schools, because a lot of times we've seen Big Ten schools dominate the Pac-12 in those non-conference games. I know Oregon recently beat Ohio State, but other than that, the Big Ten usually beats the Pac-12. So we'll see what happens there. I think next year Oregon's going to be just about as good as any team in the Big Ten. Washington obviously is going to take a big step back. USC is probably going to be around that 10-win range, and UCLA, I think they're going to be a hot mess around 5 wins. So we're all over the board. But what I do know is that they have enough talent to be successful long term, every single one of them. But I'm interested to see how the recruiting is impacted. A lot of times, again, let's just take Washington for example. They're recruiting a lot of these Western states. They're recruiting these Polynesian kids in Hawaii, Nevada, Arizona, and they're guaranteeing that okay, your parents will be able to watch you for away games. They might come up to Washington. It's going to be a lot harder to sell those recruits the fact that you have to go over to Piscataway to watch your kid play Rutgers. So that's something to watch for recruiting. As for how they change their attack schematically, to be determined. If you're already a really good team, like Oregon's not going to change much. They're already one of the best teams in college football now. A team like Washington with a brand new head coach, they're going to have to change things.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it in this way, right? Like the 3-3-5, Nebraska's defense, for instance, the 4-2-5, right? Those defenses are made for speed, and they're made to go against these spread them out offenses, right? They sacrifice a lineman for an extra defensive back, essentially, so that way you have more range, you have the ability, you have smaller edge rushers, you have smaller defensive linemen, typically smaller linebackers, but those guys can mix it up and do a lot of things. They can do coverage, they're fast, so it's one of those things. The Big Ten style of football is adapted to speed, and that's why Scott Frost didn't have to adjust. Like he said, Big Ten football is simply this. You limit the amount of possessions by running the ball, controlling the clock, milking the clock, and that way every single mistake your opponent makes is amplified times 10. That's why every single mistake that Nebraska makes against Iowa is so detrimental, because you lose 2 possessions against Iowa, that's a lot, because you're not going to get a ton of possessions. You know what I'm saying? And so that is the Big Ten style of football. And so when these Pac-12 teams aren't able to score in their first few possessions, they don't have 15 extra possessions the rest of the game. That's going to be a bit of an adjustment.
And I think even Matt Rule found this out in year one. It's all about a game within a game. Obviously, the battle for field position, teams like Iowa just exploit that constantly. And momentum is a big thing, right? Like just sticking it with Iowa. I remember, I can't remember what year this was. I believe 2021, maybe even 2022. We were up big against Iowa at Memorial Stadium, and they blocked 1 punt, scored a touchdown off it. We were still up 10 points, and you already knew Nebraska was going to lose that football game. Not because maybe Nebraska choked games, which they did, but it was more so that Iowa, once they get that momentum, once they get that confidence in them, they exploit you more than any other team. Just all those mind games within a game. It's just put at the forefront of the Big Ten football. A lot of these teams aren't used to it.
No, not at all. All right. Well, that does it for our hour. I feel like we could talk all night about this stuff, but Wilson, thank you again for joining me here.
Absolutely.
If y'all get an opportunity, go check out his TJ Lateef video. I am going to drop, actually, I'm trying to copy and paste that so I can drop it in the comments for anybody who wants to go check it out. Y'all make sure you go over to his channel. Do you want to plug anything else where they can find you or what you got coming up?
Yeah, just look up Wilson Dittman Sports on YouTube, Twitter. Again, just talking Nebraska football. Again, we're going to be doing this all offseason. Me and Justin, we have so much planned throughout this offseason. A lot of YouTube channels, they like to take breaks getting ready for fall camp. I get it. But me and him, we're going to be your places to go this summer when we're talking about Nebraska football, fall camp, recruiting, anything related to that. So make sure to hit him with the subscribe button. Make sure to hit me with that. We'll see you.
Yep. I appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, catch us here next Tuesday. We'll have the guys from the Sully Scoop podcast on next Tuesday. So right back here Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central, and I will see y'all in the next video. So peace.